everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and today we're going to be covering day 20 of the Ukraine war. This is just one day away from being 3 weeks into the war. It is unbelievable that Ukraine has stood up to what was supposedly a superpower for 3 whole weeks at this point. So, once again, to all the Ukrainians who may be watching in the chat, y'all have done the unbelievable, y'all have done the impossible. Before this war, no one thought that anyone would be able to stop the Russian steamroller from taking out Ukraine. But now, 3 weeks in nearly, we can see that that is not the case, and Ukraine actually can hold its own beyond what anyone actually believed was possible. So I have to say to all of y'all, great job. I have to thank you, President, again, Mr. Zelensky, for being such a patriot to his own country and standing up for it in a time of peril when we don't really see that stuff in the modern world or at any time in history, really. So that being said, we're going to move on to our schedule for tonight. We're, of course, going to cover the northern area first, then we'll move on to the eastern front, and then we'll move on to the southern front. And in between each front, we'll be answering questions in between. Make sure that y'all enjoy and make sure to sit back. It's been a while, actually. We've been doing this for 20 days, and I just like to say that I thank y'all all so much for showing up here every day and listening to the news. I'm very honored, and I used to say this often around every stream, but I haven't said it much now. I'm very honored that a lot of y'all spend your time, which you could be using to watch someone else give this news or doing something else entirely, and y'all come on here to listen to my news. And it's a great honor to me that y'all would do that, because I just think it's amazing. It's very cool to me that y'all actually appreciate the things I say and that they actually have some worth to someone. So I'm very honored that y'all are all here tonight. And so we also, I forgot to mention, at the end of the Southern Front, we always cover the international news, and we've had a little bit of it today, only 2 of them, so I'm just going to make sure I mention that, so that way y'all know that the questions will come after the international news instead of after the Southern Front. So, moving on from that, we're going to enter the area around Kyiv, and we're going to talk about all the developments we've seen today, and we've seen a decent bit. So the first bit we've seen is that there have been more abandoned and destroyed VDV vehicles in the Bucha area. I'm going to show y'all that right now. And so, as we can see in the video, I'm going to recap it a little. We've seen a decent amount. It looks like at least 8 APCs that had been abandoned. For the most part, it didn't look like any of them were actually destroyed, but about 8 of them abandoned. And that would be about 1/3 of the power of a normal BTG in terms of armored personnel carriers, because a normal BTG has around 30 armored personnel carriers in them, and so if we're assuming that all the armored personnel carriers are of the same kind and they're all from the same BTG there, that's about 1/3 of a single BTG's armored vehicles that have been lost there. And so a BTG has lost a decent amount of its fighting power just on that one street. So moving on to the rest of the news we've got in northwestern Kyiv, we can see that VDV artillery is being used near the area of Kyiv. Here in this video, I'll show that to y'all real quick. It appears, because I've actually watched a lot of videos of how an American artillery piece works, and I know these are smaller guns than the usual 155 millimeter artillery guns that are used in the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marines and so on. But it seems like their actual drill of firing and then loading the guns appears to be very lackluster compared to what we see whenever we get film of an American artillery piece being used. So I'm going to play this one more time, and maybe we can all see that and kind of agree on it. I mean, like, it just kind of looks like they're really disorganized. Like, this guy is waiting for this guy. You know, they're not really, like, coordinated or anything. But that's kind of my observations in the way, kind of my assumptions on that matter. And so we're going to move on from that, and we're going to move on to the Chechen special forces that we've seen fighting near North Kyiv. We've heard a decent bit about these guys, the Kadrovites, and it looks like they're just doing what every other Russian unit does, but we've actually seen them get wiped out in some areas, so I'm just going to show out the video and let y'all see for yourselves. And that's the end of the video. It was just simply some Chechen movement units moving around, and then they got engaged in some kind of firefight, or they were attacking some kind of building. Of course, probably they didn't make sure that it was clear of civilians. They were probably firing into a populated area, because that appears to be normal Russian strategy these days. So that's really all we've got on that one. So we're going to move on to the next bit of news up here, and we can see that a Fox News reporter was wounded and his cameraman was killed today. Benjamin Hall was a reporter, and he's been hospitalized after being injured on the outskirts of Kyiv. I haven't really gotten a lot of information about this, at least on my end, so I don't really know exactly how they got injured or how the cameraman got killed. It could be a variety of things. It could have been that they were shot by gunfire. It could have been that artillery shell exploded near them, or a missile exploded near them, or something like that, and then they got injured and killed that way. But nonetheless, rather unfortunate. I hate that that happened to him. Of course, they're over there just trying to report the news like everyone else, so it's very unfortunate that that happened to him. So we're going to move on from that, and we're going to move on down into the area of Kyiv, because we've had a decent amount of news today, and some very important news, but we'll get to that in a second. So the first thing that we can see is the aftermath of Russian bombing, and we've seen this picture of this high-rise before, but we've gotten more pictures today, and so I'm just going to move through and show these to y'all. Very unfortunate stuff. Moving on from that, I'm going to show you some more damage to Kyiv. I would also like to thank my moderator, Enforcer 522, for getting me this information here. He's been doing a bit of sleuthing for me today as well, and I'm very appreciative for that, because it's helping me deliver more news and more detailed news to all of y'all. And so I have to thank him very much on stream, because he's been doing a lot to help out this channel. So here's the pictures. So we can see it appears that a high-rise is ablaze. In this one, of course. Man, I don't have a Twitter account, you see, because I'm not really a big fan of it. But if you can see them from here, you can see that it's just damaged buildings. I'll have to get a Twitter account, so that way I can make sure that when we get these links, we can take a look at them. Because I'm not a big fan of Twitter. I never really wanted to be on Twitter, but it looks like I'll have to now to make sure that we can get the good, some good news out instead of just looking at it from afar. So we've gotten some very interesting news today. Now, this was really interesting news to me, is that the talks, apparently, according to the Ukrainian kind of like lead negotiator, are making headway, according to him. This is his tweet. I'll just read it to y'all real quick. Will continue tomorrow a very difficult and viscous negotiation process. There are fundamental contradictions, but there is certainly room for compromise. During the break, work in subgroups will be continued. So what we're seeing here is that at the end of this, he said there is certainly room for compromise. And so it appears that the Russians aren't going on to their hardline stance anymore, and they may be willing to meet the Ukrainians somewhere in the middle, or maybe entirely on their side as the war goes on and it keeps going poorly. We'll have to see, though. This is all the information we have about the talks at the moment, but nonetheless, this is more promising than the prior talks where they've completely fallen apart. So finally, the most important bit of information we've gotten today is that there has been a meeting of the Eastern powers, in a way. The prime ministers of Poland, Czechia, and not Czechia, I'm sorry, Czechia. I'm not really sure how that's pronounced. When I was a kid, it was called the Czech Republic, and now they've changed it to something else, and I've never really learned how it's pronounced. But Poland, Czech Republic, and Slovenia Their prime ministers met with Zelensky today, and I'm going to show you all that video right now in its entirety. Sorry about the audio being somewhat quiet. It's quiet to me as well.
Not only Kyiv, but also the western відсоток населення буде їх підтримувати. Так їм здавалось. The high-rise blocks, the aerials,
Getting lots of comments that they can't hear it.
We'll skip it then because I can't hardly hear it as well, so I'm not wanting to bore everyone to death. But nonetheless, the three main prime ministers from the three prime ministers from Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovenia met with Zelensky today, and they talked to him. I didn't really get a lot of information about what they talked about, but it's good to know that the Eastern European countries are at least traveling to Kyiv, even at risk to themselves, to go talk to Zelensky. I believe that was something that is a good show of friendship from the Eastern countries, specifically Poland, who's been trying to help them out in many ways. But it appears that the fighter jet kind of situation is still kind of in the talks, and we don't really know what direction that's going in. So we're going to move on from that, and we're going to move on to the Chernihiv area because we've covered everything in Kyiv today. And we've only had one bit of news from the Chernihiv area, and it's been some unfortunate news for the Ukrainians as a Russian Air Force video came out showing that they had destroyed supply trucks in Chernihiv. But it's not as bad as you think, because I'm about to explain why it isn't. But I'm going to let y'all see the video first, and then I'll go into why this isn't really a bad thing per se in the big picture. Unfortunately, this video has no audio, so I'm sorry about that. This time it's not quiet, it's just that it has no audio. As we can see, more and more of the kind of like stockyard around the railroad is catching on fire because it's being hit. And while that is a bad thing because the Ukrainians are getting their supplies destroyed, in the big picture, I'm taking this as not really a bad thing because it's telling us something that we really didn't have affirmation of until today. And that's that we saw that there were Ukrainian logistics trucks near those depots, which is giving us a general idea that the Ukrainians do have an intact supply line to Chernihiv, or otherwise the supply trucks wouldn't have been able to get there. And so what I'm assuming by that is that Chernihiv is not under siege, which is what the Russians have been claiming on Russian state media. And while I've been saying that it hasn't been under siege, we haven't had any surefire confirmation of that rather than statements until today, because you can see the supply trucks were able to make it through into the city and then they got destroyed. But it shows nonetheless that they were able to get there, and so that's great news, which means that the defenders of Chernihiv have not been cut off from supplies, so it's not going to be a Mariupol situation up there, which is very good news. So, with all this being covered, we've already covered the northern area, and so before we move on to the location unknowns in the Eastern Front as a whole, I'm going to answer some questions. And so what do we got, Drew?
Okay, so first question comes in via Super Chat from Adam the Great. So glad I had made it. I'm extremely appreciative of your work. Hello, all the way from Melford, Oregon. I'm out here in this beautiful town painting for a living and feeling good. Glad that we made history the other day with the fundraiser. I was able to donate $40 to it.
Thank you very much for donating to the fundraiser. By the way, if anyone's new here who hasn't been here before, we raised $29,000 for the American Red Cross over the course of 2 hours, and that has to be the biggest accomplishment that this channel has ever made. And I'm so appreciative and so proud of our little community that we have here, because we all pitched in and chipped in a bit. Drew chipped in $50. I chipped in $100. Some people matched Drew. No one was able to match me because I did it at the end. But I was so glad to see that we got such an outpouring of support for our fundraiser to help out the Red Cross, which in turn will help out Ukraine. That we upped the original goal from 5,000 to 25,000, and then we still went over it by another 5,000 or so. So I'm so thankful that you supported it, and I'm also thankful very much for your support tonight. So thank you very much once again, and I'm glad you're out there in Melford, Oregon. I haven't ever been to Oregon, but I heard that it's a nice place. And so, with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes in from John Clean via Super Chat. Avoid American news sources for the most part, question mark. They tend to be too dumbed down and slow. Do international news such as Sky News, DW, Al Jazeera, France 24, and much better coverage?
I think he's asking if I'm thinking they have better coverage, and to a point they do, because they get out a lot more of a volume of information, but they most of the time don't try and paint a picture of the information they get. They just kind of go with official statements from governments and stuff, and they don't really have anyone trying to piece together something. But in terms of American news, I generally tell people to try and avoid that a bit, because the thing with American news is that I guess they think that their viewers are dumb or something, which is a very bad assumption if you actually want to make in-depth content on anything. But they always never really describe anything. Like, I've heard them say 3 times now over the course of this war, the Russians are entering Kyiv. Like, they said that during the first days of the war when they actually got in Kyiv and made it as far as the Kyiv Zoo, which is here. They made it that far into the city, and then they got pushed back out. Then they said that again when the convoy was on its way, the 40-mile-long convoy. They said the Russians are about to enter Kyiv. And now, over the past 2 days or 3 days or so, they've been saying it again. They've been saying the Russians are entering Kyiv. And they keep on simplifying the story so much that they can't even put in context as to what that actually means. Like, are the Russians really entering Kyiv? And they always make it seem like it's the first time they've ever done it. And so I don't really like the way they report news. It's very simplified in a way, and I feel like they could really flesh out their reporting abilities if they were to actually kind of stop focusing on the opinion pieces and start focusing more on the facts. But that's getting into my opinion on it, and I'm not here to give opinion pieces. So I thank you very much for the support. I do think that international organizations do a better job to answer the question in brief. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
So, humorous little comment here from Tony Wilson, who restated the donation amount. It's nearly 3.2 million rubles.
Really? That's nuts. Man, he must be. He's a millionaire in Russia. So that being said, I'm starting to say that a little too much, but we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes in from Brant Sturgrill. Via super chat says, my father-in-law is trying to drive to Moldova Wednesday morning from the Sheen in Kyiv. What is the safest route?
Right now, I would assume, and I don't take this information surefire, because I'm trying to piece together the information as we get it, and so things may have changed in between when I just had this information all put together about an hour ago and now. But as of a few hours ago, and this is still just assumptions based off of the information we've gotten, so it may not be entirely true, but it seems like the best routes out of Kyiv would be on the H01, the P19, or the E95. Those routes are going directly south. If he was to take the, let me make sure I'm getting this road right, the E40, if he was to take the E40 directly west for a while, he would be kind of skirting the Russian front lines, and they may have started moving down towards that highway again, but we don't really know. So I would play it safe, and if he's to leave anywhere near Kyiv, I would take the southern roads out of Kyiv. So I hope that answers the question. I hope he stays safe because wars are always dangerous, and I really we know firsthand here at this channel that wars could be um, incredibly dangerous for people who aren't even in a combat zone or are just trying to make sure that they stay safe. So I hope that he is safe, and I hope he makes it out just fine. And thank you very much for the support. And we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes in from Geoff L via Super Chat. What is the daily supply like? Many small convoys running, or one big per week or day? What is Russia doing to cut off supply? Bombing along the Dnieper River? What is it like to occupy territory whose supplies for the people?
Is he? Is he? I think I may have misunderstood that question a little bit. Is he asking about how Ukrainian supplies are operating, or how Russian supplies are operating?
So that is a little. I'm assuming that it would be in regard to the Ukrainians, since this is what is Russia doing to cut off supply, and I can't imagine they'd want to cut off their own supply. So probably most likely the Ukrainians.
Got you. All right. So, what I think the Russians are doing at best is they're trying to attack the convoys, much like Ukraine is. But we haven't seen them have much success because we haven't seen a lot of video footage of destroyed Ukrainian convoys. I've seen a few, but unfortunately and unfortunately, in a way, they were NSFW because they did contain bodies inside of the videos. Dead bodies, and so I can't show that on stream, and so most of them have never made it on stream, but. Um, in terms of what the Russians are doing, they're really just trying to airstrike logistics, kind of like how Ukraine is in a way, but they're not really as successful with it, I believe, because they're not using the Air Force to its fullest extent due to the airspace still being contested. So, whatever they're doing, they're not really doing well. We know they're not attacking any convoys around the Dnieper River because the only ability they have to do that is down near Zaporizhia to Kherson, and we know that not a lot of supply convoys are apparently going there because we haven't had a lot of video evidence of them being destroyed or getting into some kind of confrontation with the Russians. So I think if I was to limit down that question to a very simple answer and from what we know as an assumption in a way, I would assume that the Russians are just trying to conduct airstrikes on the logistics, and they also attack supply depots within the cities. But beyond that, we really don't know much, and we also don't know a lot about how big the convoys are and how often they supply. And even if we did, I really wouldn't like to give that information over stream because it'd be giving a lot of information about how the Ukrainian army operates. And we all have a vested interest in Ukraine's kind of like security, and so disclosing the supply side of things, which is one of the most important parts of war, would be somewhat ill-advised in a way. But I do thank you for the question. I hope I answered it the best I could. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And I'm getting feedback from the mods that my audio may be a little too loud, maybe since you had to adjust it for the video you were just playing there. Mike Smith just came in with a $150 donation. Not even a question to do it.
Well, thank you very much, man. He just walked in, I guess, and he was just like, "Here you go," and he just walked off. I mean, like, wow, thank you, man. That's very nice of you. We love any support that we can get here because the super chats are really the only way this channel supports itself. So the super chats help us make sure that the channel keeps running. And so I thank everyone who does that, and you just came through and threw down the big bucks, and I thank you very much for that because that will definitely ensure that the channel can keep running for a good while. So I thank you very much for that, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Oh, geez. So Big Tex here says, you guys are killing me. Geoff is pronounced just Jeff. You're welcome.
Is that a super chat?
It was a super chat, yes.
Dude, I thought it was pronounced Jeff. Like, I think I said that last night. I was like, I think it's Jeff, but I didn't know either. It sounds like Geoff, but I'm not going to make fun of his name. I thank you all so much for the support. We're going to make sure to start calling Geoff Jeff because that's what it's actually supposed to be. So thank you for that, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes in from Rainer, and I think I'm reading that one right. Why did you not lead with the 3 EU leaders travel to Kiev to show support for Ukraine? Warsaw, Poland, AP, the Prime Minister of Poland, Czech Republic, and Slovenia. That is amazing news.
The reason why I didn't cover that first is because when I kind of cover news, I usually like to save the best for last and have the news kind of build up in its locations and also how important it is to the final point of what was the most important thing to take away from that area. And so maybe I'll start off with the biggest thing first, but usually I like to save the best for last, just kind of because I guess that's kind of how I work. I like to make sure that the best things are the best news is kind of like the last thing you hear, so that way the area ends on a high note instead of a low note. Because if I started off with the best news first and then I got to the worst news, like if I showed you the prime minister's talking in Ukraine and then at the end of all the news in this area, I ended out with like a Ukrainian convoy being destroyed or something, it would be in reverse and you would end every single area on a low note. So I think that's kind of like my deep psyche reason for saving the best info for last. But it is huge news, and that's why I made sure to save it for last, so that way the emphasis of it being so important to me wouldn't be lost. So I thank you so much for the support, and it was a pretty decent question. I think we might start looking into changing how the formatting is done if everyone can agree on that. And so, that being said, we're going to answer one more question, and then we're going to move on to the Eastern Front. So, what is our
Alrighty,
last
so
question?
Jeff Brown, Jeff, donated $20 super chat to tell Geoff to change his name to Jeff. That way it won't be mispronounced.
Oh man, that's funny. Um, well, I mean, I'm not gonna tell Jeff what Jeff
His
can.
name is perfect the way it is.
Yeah, it's perfect the way it is. It's beautiful. It's very unique, and unique is good in its own ways. So we've covered all the questions we're going to cover in between the Eastern Front. I know a lot of people want to just get to the news, and so we're going to get to that right now. And so we're going to move on to all of our location unknowns. And you may start noticing that I keep on packing these tighter and tighter because I'm figuring out like you can just keep on infinitely zooming in pretty much and make up all the room you need. So the first bit of news we've gotten today is that there was an ambushed Russian convoy, and I'm going to show you all that right here. It's a top-down picture of it, but you can see that all the supply trucks have been burned out. I'm not really sure whose these are. They may be Russian that were abandoned. But what we do know is that we have at least 5 logistics trucks burned out, which is very good news. As you know, the usual supply convoy for a BTG, if they were to have to resupply on everything, I believe, per day, it would be around 8 fuel vehicles. While these aren't fuel vehicles, these are just normal flatbed supply trucks. There is at least 4 of those destroyed and a tanker. So that's a decent amount of supplies that were destroyed right there in that one picture, which is incredibly good news for Ukraine. We're going to move on to the next bit of news. We can see that a Russian tank was destroyed. This has kind of been a normal sight. They've destroyed hundreds of these tanks, but I'm going to show you all this one right here because this one's a little special. It's got no audio, unfortunately, but I hope you all find it very interesting. The tank's also down here by my mouse cursor, by the way. So, as always, good stuff to see Russian tanks being destroyed. We know that the Ukrainians are holding whenever they do something like that for the most part. So we're going to move on to the next bit of news. We've seen that there are more war spoils for Ukraine. They keep on to just keep getting. Russia is the gift that never stops giving in a way. We can see here that it appears that they've gotten another armored personnel carrier. I don't know the exact kind of like specification of this one. I don't know the exact name. I was wanting to say BMD-4, but I think I've seen BMD-4s that look a little different than that. So I'm not entirely sure if it is, but I'm kind of leaning towards that direction. We can also see that they've captured some small arms here. It appears that there was a machine gun. Some kind of gun. I really can't tell what it is. It looks like it may have been a bullpup of some kind, but I'm not going to say that. And we also have what appears to be just a normal AK-74, AK-105 kind of gun with a grenade launcher attached, some scopes, spam cans, and some kind of, oh, well, not some kind of, it's the ammo belt for the machine gun. We also have some uniform over here. We can see it from another angle. We can see that they've apparently gotten a phone, a bit of VDV ribbon. I'm not sure if that's just a ribbon that they hand out a lot in the Russian army or a VDV ribbon. We can also see the dollar tag here with their credit card. Of course, that credit card is worthless because the ruble's worthless. And we also have their IDs. Apparently, it's duplicate IDs of the same guy, which is, Interesting. That may be his military ID right here, considering it has the seal of the Russian Federation on it. And then lastly, we have all the equipment here. And yeah, so that's good news. So we're going to move on to the next bit, and we've seen that there are some grads in this video. Of course, it's the usual thing, just grads launching their missiles. I'm just going to show you that real quick. So I'm going to cut that short. I don't really know whose grads these are because it's too dark to really tell what kind of camo they have on them. I believe these are most likely Russian, though. Yeah, it actually is Russian. It says Russian on it. So the Russian grads, we don't know where they are or where they're firing, but we do know that there was at least 2 or 3 of them in the video. Hopefully no one was killed, but of course, knowing the Russians, they probably targeted the place with the most civilians in it because that appears to be their kind of MO at this point. So we're going to move on from that, and we can see that there's more damage in Ukrainian cities. I wasn't able to iron down exactly where this is, but we can see that apparently there was a fire inside of this apartment block. We can see that all the stores on ground level have been pretty much blown out. And once again, unfortunately, more damage to Ukraine. We've been seeing this a lot, just seeing loads of it. The Russians are just inflicting massive amounts of damage on the infrastructure that Ukraine just uses daily. Hopefully that can be fixed after the war. I'm sure that a lot of countries will step up to the plate and give them money to rebuild the country. Hopefully they will. And so we're going to move on from that bit of news. There wasn't really much to add to that. And we can see Ukrainians taking shelter. The conditions appear to be somewhat poor. I'm not really sure where this is, but it appears to be maybe some kind of amphitheater. But it doesn't look like they're in the best of conditions. So, I don't really know where these people are supposed to go. That's kind of my problem here, is because I know they probably cannot leave wherever they are, because leaving a city is incredibly dangerous. People do get killed because the Russians just shoot at everything that moves. So these people are going to be stuck in this kind of situation in these somewhat unsavory, well, very unsavory living conditions for who knows how long, until something can change for them to be able to leave. It's really unfortunate to look at something like that, and I hope that once again motivate some of y'all to call your congressmen and representatives and governors and so on, and try and persuade them that maybe we should start taking a stronger stance against the war in Ukraine, and maybe strong-arm the Russians into some kind of peace agreement with the Ukrainians. So we're going to move on from that. We're going to move on to the next bit of news we've gotten, which is a residential building on fire. This is only a picture, but as you can see here, the building is ablaze. And it appears that firefighters are working around the clock to try and put it out. But the blaze is very large, so we don't know if their efforts will be successful or not. Hopefully they will be. But that's all we know about that as of the moment, is that we've just seen more buildings destroyed in Ukraine, probably burned out and will never be used again. We also have another house on fire. I'm sorry if these are all within different strings of pictures. I didn't actually find a large picture thread today. But this is also another house on fire somewhere in Ukraine. We don't know the exact location, but it's unfortunate to see that people are constantly having their livelihoods destroyed by Putin's goons in Ukraine. And it's terrible to think about the amount of damage that's being inflicted on these people on a daily basis. Because you know these people have sat there and probably grown up and lived there their entire lives like most people do, and then they just have it all destroyed within the course of one night, within the course of a few weeks in one war. And it's very sad to think about that, and actually think about what it would be like to live in someone's shoes and having their house destroyed in a war. So we're going to move on to the next bit of news. There's a lot of location unknowns today. Unfortunately, it appears that the amount of location unknowns that we keep on running into is rising, because I believe people are just getting tired of trying to give very high fidelity information and make sure there's a lot of detail to them, because people are getting tired over there, and that's entirely understandable. I can understand where they're coming from, because I too am tired because I get a little bit of sleep. I actually had a really big break today, though, so that was nice, but I do get very little sleep, and I focus on this a good bit. So we're going to move on from the house being on fire. We're going to show y'all a T-80U that was captured by the Ukrainians that's being transported to another location. It's always good stuff to see. I'm glad to see it. It's always good to know that the Ukrainians just keep on going. It appears that a farmer may have donated that, and they loaded it up on a truck, and they're going to use it elsewhere. And hopefully, wherever they use it, it will be put to good use. So we're going to move on from that, and we're going to go to the Russians fighting against each other. It appears that the beatings don't stop, and it doesn't even stop for the Russians themselves. And so I'm going to show y'all this video as a Russian just wails down on this one here. And I'm going to rewind this so that y'all can see it in its entirety. And you're looking right where the mouse is circling right now. That's where the little brawl is going to happen. It's interesting to see that the Russians are fighting in their own army, but they beat each other within their own army. It's like just super cruel people who are just traveling around the country inflicting suffering on each other and everyone else that gets in their way. So if you want to take anything out of that video, you can take out of it that the Russians, even the soldiers that apparently aren't doing much from this video, are not nice people because they resort to torturing each other if they cannot torture others. It appears that that was kind of an organized and coordinated event by the Russians as well, so I'm not really sure what that would suggest. Maybe that was some kind of corporal punishment in the field or something. I'm not really sure, but nonetheless, it's a very interesting video to just take a look at. So we're going to move on to the next bit of news. We can see that civilians are fleeing with their dogs. These pictures are very sweet and very moving. I thought they were just incredibly sweet because I have a dog myself, and you know, the dogs must mean a lot to these people for them to be taking them with them and going through such struggle to do that. And we just got a few more. I just I just really like that people are making sure to take care of their dogs as well, because dogs can be easily overlooked in a war, and sometimes it's understandable because they're not as important as human lives at the end of the day, but I still love to see that people do think about the small things when it comes to war. These are cats. These aren't even dogs, but still the thing shows that people are taking care of their pets even while they're trying to leave the country, and I like that. It's just a nice thing that they're doing for their pets that, you know, love them unconditionally, and so it's just very nice to see that. So moving on from that, we can see that several T-72B3s were lost in the exact same area of fighting, in like the exact same field. So here's the first one. Here's the second one. And there's the third one. 3 T-72B3s lost in one area. And then also a BMP-2. I mean, like, the Russians just keep on losing things at this rate. They won't have an army to return home with at the end of this war. And so I believe that that may be one of the reasons why the Russians seem to be becoming more amicable in the talks with Ukraine, is because they're starting to see that this can't last for much longer at the going rate. That being said, we're going to move on to the next bit of news that we've gotten. We can see that there was an abandoned Sturm here in this video. I'll show that to y'all right now. I'm telling you, I just gotta say this again. I know I already said it, but the Russians are a gift that just never stops giving. Everyone gets a little bit of something. The farmers, the people in the city, everyone gets something. regardless of what it is, they're going to get it. Um, so I think that's great because when the war is over, and this is no exaggeration at this point, the Ukrainians could probably ask the farmers and so on to hand over the vehicles that they captured to the Ukrainian military. And the Ukrainians are going to be able to rearm themselves just based off the captured vehicles alone. Hopefully, maybe they would be able to return back to pre-war strength, just off the bat with a couple of renovations to some of these vehicles. But that's still great to see that they've captured so many of them. It's an incredibly good job. So we're going to move on. We see that there's been more destroyed Russian tanks here in this video. Well, not video, it's really more of a picture. But we can see a BMP-3, we can see a T-72 over here in this orange circle, and then we can see 3 T-72s right here in one group. So in this one picture, the Russians have lost 4 T-72s and a single BMP-3. Just for y'all to know, there's only 10 tanks per BTG. So this is nearly half of a BTG's tank force that we see in this one picture here. And then the BMP-3 is kind of inconsequential because there's 30 of them per BTG, but it's still nice to know that at least an extra one of those have been destroyed as well. So we're going to move on to the next one. We can see here that another grad has been stolen. We're starting to see these stolen in higher amounts. I'm just going to show the video.
Спиздили грода, нахуй.
You know, it's just crazy. It's really crazy. I mean, it's kind of like same old stuff in Ukraine. We've seen this multiple times now over the course of 3 weeks, but it's still just so great to see that the Ukrainians are somehow just stealing stuff from the Russians just in huge amounts. I mean, like, this is what half of the location unknown stuff is. It's just stolen stuff. So we're going to move on to the next bit of news. We can see that there's been some damage in an unknown location. I tried to pull this city up. I labeled it as unknown because I couldn't actually find a town called Okhturka. I couldn't find a town named that on Google Maps, and so I just had to leave it as as a location unknown. But if y'all know where that is, then this is in Okhturka. So I'm just gonna let y'all see the damage. The video description was also saying this is reminiscent of the Battle of the Somme, which is pretty true. The destruction at this point in this city is incredible, and it's a level of devastation. It's pretty much on par with World War I levels of destruction in No Man's Land, which tells you the ferocity of Russian bombardments and how much danger civilians can be up near the front lines, because with this kind of damage, you can of course assume that people would be in a very high risk of being killed in a place like this. Unfortunately, this video has no audio, so I'll try and add a little bit to it. We can see here that a railroad was actually hit here in this town of Okhturka, and I would like to rewind for a second to point this out, that apparently an explosion was large enough that it actually uplifted, it appears, this rail car off the rails and offset it where it's now derailed. It also blew a hole in the middle of this track, and it also kind of picked it up and moved it over to the side a little bit. So the damage to the actual railroad has been somewhat extensive, but you can actually kind of repair that pretty quickly if you have a good crew. So you see this is a decently deep crater. Not really sure how that one was made. We just get a panning shot of it. We're going to move on from that because this is just it spinning in a circle. Damage is extensive, however. We can see here that this building that appears to be made out of concrete, most likely. So it's not anything of like a soft structure like wooden or anything. But this thing has been nearly entirely destroyed. It appears that the inside has been gutted by fire. We can see that they're zooming out here onto more damage. I'm gonna fast forward this a little bit more. This is the inside of the building and the back wall, and we can see that nearly the entire thing is collapsed except for the front wall. It's terrible to see. I really hope that we start stepping up here soon and start taking a little bit more action against Russia in some way. Although it may be a tough thing to do, I believe it is the right thing to do, because it's very hard to see this kind of stuff happen all around Ukraine to people who don't really deserve this kind of thing to happen to them. They haven't done anything. They were just minding their own business days, weeks, and months before this war. And so it's wrong to see this happen to them. And so we're going to move on. And the Ukrainians have captured a rare SPG. This is once again me putting the best information for last. But we can see here that they have captured a Kosta self-propelled gun mortar. It looks like it was built off of a Sturm or PT-76 kind of like base. But it's incredibly interesting to see that they've captured one of these. I haven't actually seen one of these captured before. I believe this may be the first time it's been captured in the war. So it's very neat that they've captured a rare vehicle. And hopefully if they win this war, they can put it in a military museum. So we're going to move on from that. We've actually covered all of the location unknowns now. I'm sorry if that was a lot of them. There was a decent amount there because we just keep on getting more and more of them per day. And now we're going to move on past Sumy. Unfortunately, we haven't heard anything new from Sumy since yesterday. That may suggest a lull in the fighting for the most part, but we're not entirely sure, so we'll just have to wait and see how that unfolds. So now we're going to move on down to Kharkiv. We've gotten about 3 bits of news today, each of them equally interesting and important, but I'm going to show each of them to you from left to right. So the first thing we've seen is that a Russian plane was shot down near Kharkiv. I'll show you that video right here. I'll rewind it a little bit. You see the jet got hit right then.
Yes! Сбил! Меняйте! Что? Купол есть, купол! Нет, сбили.
Нет, есть летчик, купол.
Где?
Принял, плюс.
But it's very good to always see a jet get shot down. Everyone always cheers whenever a jet gets shot down because it's a huge deal to do something like that. So we know that that's once again another aircraft that can be marked on the kill count for Russian aircraft. And so we're going to move on to the next bit of news from the city. And this one's a bit more unfortunate. We can see that the Russians actually shelled the city as evacuations were underway, trying to get civilians out of buildings and such. And I'm just going to let you see the video because while the Russians may have not known that these evacuations were going on, the fact that they keep on bombarding civilian areas and making such things as this incredibly dangerous just says a lot about the Russian approach to war and how they don't really care about human lives or civilian lives, more importantly. It's just unfortunate to know that civilians are under attack day in and day out. No one can get a rest or a break or make sure that they can take care of the people who need to be taken care of. It's incredibly aggravating, and hopefully y'all find it as aggravating as I do, and hopefully we can all do something about that hopefully in the future. We were able to raise $29,000 for the Red Cross, and no one expected us to be able to do that. And if we were able to do that, we were able to do a whole lot more than what we can ever expect of this community. So make sure to call up your representatives and speak your mind and your opinion about what's going on in Ukraine, and maybe they'll start to change their stance as to how they're viewing this war. So we're going to move on to the last bit of news that we've seen in Kharkiv today, and this was incredibly moving if you thought the last bit was concerning due to the disregard of the care of civilians. This one will definitely stir you up a lot. Dad was told that his son had died, and so in response to that, he decided that he would return back to the city where his son had died, which was in Kharkiv, and that he would take his place to defend the city. So I'm going to let y'all see that. It's very emotional, but nonetheless, I'm just gonna let y'all see it in its entirety.
Сейчас застигла меня. Она зацепила моего сына.
А в каком смысле? Что с вашим сыном произошло?
Его убили.
Сейчас? В каком городе?
Город Харьков.
Сколько ему было лет?
23. Просто 23. Вы понимаете, у меня переполнение чувств.
Вместо
Еще.
сына он хочет пойти.
На тот момент, когда он мне говорил, говорит, папа, все плохо, все очень плохо. Но мы держимся, все хорошо. Мальчики, не едьте сюда. Вам будет смерть. Вы убили моего сына, я убью вашего сына. И это будет непрекращенная вот эта вот херня, понимаете? Вообще не приезжайте сюда.
Hopefully he goes back and makes the people who killed his son pay for what they did. And so, with that being said, on that heavy emotional note, we've now covered all the information that we have for the Eastern Front and the location unknowns. So now we're going to start moving down towards the Southern Front. And before we do, we're going to take some questions. And so what do we got, Drew?
So first up in the queue, we have from Ian Mooney, M-O-O-N-E, and I don't know how to pronounce that one. Anyways, via Super Chat, just got into the stream, and this is one of those interesting ones that you're going to want to comment on here, of course. Just got into the stream, heading over to Ukraine to join the fight, and wondering how to get from Poland to Ukraine. 4-year combat engineer, and have my AEMT, hoping to be useful.
Well, if you're heading over there, that's great. But to go through the whole process, I'm just going to explain the whole process, and hopefully this fills you in on it. If you're from the United States, you go to the Ukrainian embassy, and you can either go to it in person, call them, or email them, and then they will give you information about what you need to do to be able to go over there. As far as I know, and I'm going to make sure that Drew backs me up on this, they provide the airfare and the equipment, as far as I know.
That's my understanding.
Okay, so
I have heard mixed things about the equipment, that it's best to bring what you can if you have equipment that you can bring onto an airplane, I guess.
okay, so at least we know that they provide airfare for free. So they provide the airfare for free, so all that's taken care of. There's absolutely no money that needs to be taken care of there. And then once you arrive in Poland, all you have to do is go to the border, let them know that you are there to volunteer to fight, you know, and then they'll start you through the process there. I don't know the exact details of the process, but it doesn't take long. It's about a day, and then they'll send you into Ukraine, and then you'll be able to meet up with a unit, and then they will put you to the work of war, I guess you could call it. So best of luck to you. Hope that everything goes well with that, and just remember that everything, once again, is mostly provided for, except for some of the equipment, maybe like body armor or something like that, but then again, we don't have any information to back that up. So that being said, I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
This next comment comes in from J7, who was trying to provide some information on the town that you were looking for that I can't pronounce. It starts with an OK. He says that it's north of Poltava, west of Kharkiv.
North of Poltava, west of Kharkiv. So north and then west is somewhere around here. Let's see if I can find it. Okturka. I can't find it. But I'm sure he's right where it is. It's just that I have a bad eye and can't see it. So I thank you very much for the info on that. And so we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes in from Christopher Ryan via Super Chat, who asks, "No drinking game tonight? Question mark. LOL, thanks Mr. Presenter and all the mods for doing this daily. I don't have to worry about checking the headlines because I know I can just wait for the stream."
Well, I thank you very much for the support and the good comments. I always love to know that I'm actually a good enough at reporting this news that people can rely on me every day to get their dose of Ukraine war news. And no drinking game tonight. I kind of wanted to abstain from that because while I do like to try and keep things a little light in some ways, it is still serious news nonetheless. And so I decided that it probably is not in good taste all the time to do the drinking game thing. But since you said that, that being said, take a sip. I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, so this is interesting. G off via super chat, who asks who's supporting the Ukrainian civilians in occupied territory, and then he states that he prefers G off.
Huh, okay. So looks like Jeff and Geoff are gonna get in a fight in the chat. So and the moderators, if y'all like to make a little ring for everyone to gather around and watch that go down, I'd love to see that. Unfortunately I can't. But I believe he's asking who's providing for them, and the answer to that would most likely be Russian occupying forces, if you can expect them to provide anything, because they can hardly provide anything to their soldiers. So I'm assuming that they are probably not able to provide anything to the civilians as well. But we'll have to see how that goes, because that's something I actually did not weigh into the logistical considerations, is that they're also now having to supply at least the minimum requirements of food, water, and so on to the citizens of their occupied territories. So that's something very interesting to think about. I may actually have to revisit my logistics numbers, and the number of trucks required may even be a lot higher now than it once was, so that way they don't have any crises on their hands, because it will be on the internet as quick as anything. So thank you very much for the support. That's actually a really interesting question. I believe it is most likely Russian military police that are kind of providing for the law and order in the occupied areas, and then we'll have to try and get a little bit more information if they're actually supplying the Ukrainians with any kind of food or anything like that. But nonetheless, thank you for the support, thank you for the question, and with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
Next one comes in from Mark Bo Highchuck. And I very much do appreciate the phonetic spelling. If you guys don't want me to butcher your usernames there, be super fun. He says, "Here's 5 Canadian for the rum fund," and then he provides his phonetic spelling, and he says, "Right, G off."
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and also thank you very much for doing the phonetic spelling, because it helps out Drew a lot, and it would have helped out me a lot if that was a thing that was happening when this channel hadn't blown up yet, because sometimes I had no clue either how names were supposed to be pronounced. So thank you so much for doing that. And that being said, we're going to answer 2 more questions, and then we're going to move on to the Southern Front.
Okay, this next question will be easy to answer because it's just a donation from Baydad 2006. Here's $20.
Thank you very much. I hope I answered that question well enough. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes in from Slayer of Cats, and I hope he's not talking about real cats. I hope he's just being clever with his words via super chat. Look at it this way: you getting a Twitter account keeps me and many like-minded people from having to get one ourselves.
Now he's pulling the sacrifice for the greater good thing, and man, now you're gonna make me get it. So I'll probably work on that tomorrow after the stream is over. And so I thank you very much for the support. And you're right, I really do want to save people from having to go on Twitter if I can. So I'll get one for myself and make sure to save you all the trouble of having to get on there and look through all that stuff. So we've covered all the questions now that we're going to cover in between the Eastern Front and the Southern Front, and now we're going to move on to the Southern Front, because we've had a little bit of news come out today from all around the Southern Front, and I believe that y'all find it most interesting. We're actually not going to start off with this marker. We're going to start off with this one, because these two are actually chronologically attached to each other. They're actually the same aircraft in 2 different videos. Here we can see Russian Su-25s flying low over Donetsk. I'm going to show y'all this video. It's very short. I'll rewind it. I really didn't do a good job at rewinding it. Let's quickly play it. And so you can see the 2 of them there. And so we're going to move on to the next bit of film, and we can actually see them kind of flying around over Orlivka. A decent bit in formation still. So I'm going to show you all that video. They're right out there, the 2 black dots. hopefully they'll get shot down. Usually Su-25s, most aircraft actually from the kill count we got yesterday have been shot down. There's something like 70 something aircraft that the Russians have lost, which is a really high number. So hopefully they keep up that kind of pace in the Ukrainian, air defense forces. So we're going to move on from that. We can hear this Mi-28 in the distance in this video. Apparently, from what I was told with this video, context of it is that this Mi-28 is attacking Ukrainian positions. So I'm just going to let y'all hear the video for yourselves.
Звук вертушки. Сейчас посмотрим, где откошмарят укропов. Где-то приближается. Приближается. Стою на остановке, поселок Голубовское. В ответ им за Донецк, наверное. По всей линии фронта надо было работать. Что творится? Больше 20 человек погибло в Донецке. Слышите, да? Ну, не вижу. Пока не вижу. Он пошел. Но низко, низко. Прям над бугром. Сейчас О, пошел работать. Вон он. Сейчас и этот сработает. Вот он, заходит. На, получайте. Получайте, фашисты. Красавцы, ребята. Люба, братан. Так их нечисти эту бубновую, блядь.
Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to run this by the translators today to know that what he was saying. But what was interesting to me is that hopefully some other people caught on to this, and not to take it a little off topic, but this guy sounds a lot like the voice actors in Escape from Tarkov. I don't know if that's just me. Maybe some other people have noticed that, but I just found it weird how like prototypical his voice sounded in a way. But nonetheless, we saw the Mi-28 out in the distance, heard the sound of the rocket fire, and so we get a general idea of what was going on in that video. So we're going to move on from the Donetsk area, and we're going to move down to Mariupol. We don't have much news that's come out of Mariupol today, rather than this one video, and I have to preface this a good bit and get y'all ready for this, because this is something. And surprisingly, it wasn't NSFW when I looked at it. Hopefully it's still not, so I can show it to y'all. But a man was walking through the streets of Mariupol, and I guess he was trying to get from somewhere to another place, and he had to, it was some kind of emergency, and he had to pass a Russian tank. And so he put his hands up and tried to scoot past the tank and not get himself killed, and the Russians blew him away with a main gun. It's extremely disturbing to watch, so I'm giving y'all a little bit of a advance notice to know what's in store for you, but I'm going to let y'all see the video, and it's somewhat disturbing. I gotta tell you, I just don't know how anyone can support the Russians. It's what they're doing is obvious. It's just sick at this point. How much they actually target civilians. It's not like they're just indirectly hitting them and they are just being negligent. They're targeting them. They're singling them out. We saw in that one video right there, they did it right then and there. And while that may be an exception, that's showing that there's a decent amount of just bloodlusting soldiers in the Russian army who mean they're going to just try and kill civilians just because. It's just sick. It's just gross. It's terrible. Hopefully these people will pay for what they do. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten a lot of news out of Mariupol today. All we know is that the city is still holding at the moment, which is very good news. Hopefully it will keep on holding. So we're going to move on from that, because I'm sure there will be a decent amount of news coming out of Mariupol tomorrow. Once again, to anyone who's watching the stream that has family in Mariupol, my thoughts and prayers are with y'all. It's a very tough thing to have a family inside of a siege. Hopefully they can make it out and make it out safely. So we're going to move on from Mariupol now, and we're going to move on to the rest of the news that we've gotten around the southern front, starting off in Kherson, where today we can see that there was a Smerch driving through the middle of the city. I'm going to show you all that right here. So as you can see, a decent amount of support vehicles following the Smerches around. We don't know exactly where they're heading in that video, but we do know that they're moving through the city of Kherson to some other location, maybe to Mykolaiv. But I don't think they'll be used much well at, well, they won't be used much nor well at Mykolaiv, because it appears that there was a counterattack today, and they got a lot of ground back from the Russians. They also captured an electronic warfare vehicle in the process of this counterattack today. Show you all that right now. And they also captured an artillery battery, and so I'm going to show you all that here as well. Unfortunately, I can't click on the pictures, or it'll ask me to get an account, and we all know I don't have one. But you can see here that they've captured the shells, the powder. Well, not the powder. Yeah, they actually captured the powder. There's the powder right there, and the guns along with it. So that's very good stuff. It's great to know that the Ukrainians aren't just being pushed back and they're merciless. They're kind of like helpless against the Russian push. They can actually counterattack, and they actually do a pretty good job at it as well. So it's always good to know that they have that ability. And finally, our last bit of news today is that we've seen more missile strikes in Mykolaiv. This has become a regular scene here, and I believe that they're starting to bombard Mykolaiv as much as the rest of them because they consider it a very important target to their plans. So you can see the fire's blazing. It may be another oil silo, fuel silo, because they've been hitting those a decent bit throughout the course of this war. So I really can't attest to what it is. It would be an assumption, and I'm not going to try and lay down too much assumptions right now about that one, because it really could be anything. I'm going to wait for more video tomorrow to make a good statement about what it could be. It's saying up here that it's allegedly close to the 301st AA Regiment base, so it may actually be a fuel silo, but I'm not entirely sure. So now we're going to move on out to sea, where we've seen something somewhat alarming today. We've seen more fleet movements near Odessa. According to satellite footage right here, we can see that there are 3 different groups of ships. We have landing ships that appear to be in a line, some kind of like, I guess you could call it a column formation. And then we have 2 different groups of support ships that are supporting this landing party from what they know, heading towards Odessa. Now, they're not going to attack the city directly from what I believe, because that will probably be the most difficult thing to do. And if anyone knows anything about military strategy, usually you try and find the area of the least resistance and go there instead and try and exploit the weaknesses through, enemy lines, because it would kind of be suicidal and pointless to attack the most heavily defended area, because you'd just be losing a whole bunch of resources for no reason. But then again, the Russians are kind of an unpredictable bunch, and they do a whole bunch of dumb stuff from what we can tell. So maybe they would attack Odessa directly. That would probably be the best case scenario for the Ukrainians, because they have set up armor inside the city themselves. And I'm going to show you all that right now, because this is something as well. As we can see here, they have a T-64BV looking out to sea. We can see another one here. We can see another picture. This one appears to be on the side of the tank. I believe that may actually be the same tank, but from the other side. And then there's another tank on down besides this pile of sandbags that has a statue in it. And it's just looking out over the harbor. And they have a couple of them. They also have a BMP-2 from what it appears. And another T-64BV that's dug in and ready to defend the city. Hopefully they'll do a very good job at it. If the naval invasion does occur right on Odessa, hopefully they'll be able to defend against it incredibly well, and the naval invasion will fall flat. That's at least all we can hope for. And so, moving on from that, we have just a little bit of international news today, and I was very glad to see this. This was very nice and heartwarming, kind of like a change from all the doom and gloom that we see a good bit. We actually saw that Italian school children welcome some Ukrainian refugee children to their school. And I'm going to show you all that right now. It's a very sweet little video. And so, here we are. That was a very nice little thing. I'm glad that they welcome the children incredibly well. You know, they're probably very sad about what's happened in their country, and they probably seen things that children shouldn't see. And it's very good to know that they're trying to make things as best as possible for these children in that school in Italy. It's a very sweet little thing, and I'm very glad that they did that for them. And so, moving on to the big hitting international news today, the United States government has approved a bill giving $13.6 billion in aid to Ukraine. $13.6 billion is very large for the Ukrainians. I believe it's around 3 times the size of their current military budget per year. And so they're getting that all in one lump sum. I'm not really sure if they're going to send that all in lethal aid or just as money for them to spend at their own discretion. But regardless, $13.6 billion in aid is nothing to scoff at. That's incredibly large, and hopefully it'll help out the Ukrainians in ways that we can't even anticipate at the moment. And so, very interestingly enough, only about an hour and 30 minutes into the stream, we've already covered all the news. And so I bet a lot of people who want to just hear the news are really happy, and now we can focus on answering questions for the rest of the night. And so, what do we got, Drew?
So we do have a significant backlog of these super chats, over 30 at the morning. And I just want to explain that we do aim to answer every single one of the super chats, as well as some regular questions from the general question pool that we identify. As a very rough sorting mechanism, they are generally sorted in accordance with the donation amount, just because that seems equitable and a way to do it. So if you're wondering why your question hasn't been answered, it just we got so many of them. We have to have some kind of a way to sort them. Sorry if it's a little crude there. But first question, or next question, we've got Geoff once again with a $20 super chat. Says, that being said, this is the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What actually, speaking about that being said, that's probably going to become a catchphrase of this channel. So watch out for that in the future, because it seems like a lot of people love it and hate it at the same time. But I'm very happy that everyone kind of has a bit of fun with that, because I know I do it a lot as well, but it's just kind of a habit of mine at this point. But once again, thank you for the support, Geoff, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question here comes in from Logan Casey. Are the Syrians just for cannon fodder?
Yes, I believe so, because they still don't look like they know anything. So, thank you for the support. The answer is very simple, so that's really all I can add to it. They'll probably turn into the next sunflowers that grow in the Ukrainian fields. So, thank you very much for the question and the support, and we're going to move on to the next one.
This next question comes in from Ian Moore via Super Chat. Good to hear that I won't have to pay for airfare. I've already saved up to, which means I can put more into my med bag and body armor. I don't feel like rocking my old ESAPI and IBA. A EMT is one step below paramedic.
Interesting. Well, I'm glad you got some gear to use over there, and it's a good thing to know. It's a good thing for everyone to know that you don't have to pay for airfare. And one thing I always find important, and I like to mention this to everyone just as a precaution. If anyone's saying that they want to go over to Ukraine and they need money for airfare, that's not the case, and you need to tell them that the Ukrainians actually do provide for airfare. So they need to check in with the Ukrainian embassy, so that way they can know what's going on before they start going and asking for ways for people to help them pay for their airfare. So just wanting everyone to know about that. I'm very glad you got some equipment, and I hope you go over there and put yourself to great use and help them win that war. And so I thank you very much for the support, and with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And a comment from myself here. Obviously, be cautious if people on the internet are asking you to give them money to help get over there. There's tons of scams going on at the moment. We've been seeing this on NPR on the news. We shared a FBI link in the announcements talking about the scams that are going on right now. So just be cautious. Next question comes in from Seth Taylor via Super Chat. Says there's an upload on Salty Cracker for someone who is over there, from someone who is over there, worth a watch before anyone goes over to join the fight.
I think I know which one he's talking about, and I'm not really sure if that one is really true or not, because if you look at this guy, there's no way that someone that looks like him has had any military experience. And I'm not trying to like do an ad hominem attack on this guy or anything, but The video I saw today, he pretty much said a whole bunch of unfounded stuff. It didn't really have any fact or basis to it, and it just seemed really questionable. So if that's the video you're talking about, I would look at that one a little bit more. It may be true, it may not be, but I think that it needs to be scrutinized a little bit more by the public to make sure that it's true and not just someone trying to get some attention and be pro-Russian and what he said. And so that being said, I thank you very much for the support, and I think a lot of people should really get a better concept of what a war is before they go over there, because wars are not fun in any way. They're very boring and hellish in the times that they're not boring. So I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
I will speak a little bit to your comment in regards to somebody's physical appearance doesn't necessarily at all indicate former military experience, because there's all kinds even while you're in.
That's true, but if you saw the video I was talking about, you would be thinking, I mean, you know, it
I got you. I got you. I'm just saying in general. Even at PT, man, there are some people who needed a little bit more. But I hear you.
Got you. And that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes in from Fancy Forest Person. Americans have a lot of extra guns. Is there any way that we can donate some of them?
I really don't know. I mean, like, I know that a lot of companies are sending over ammo. Some companies have taken it upon themselves to send ammo overseas, but I don't really know about the guns, because there's a lot of laws pertaining to guns in foreign countries, and although Poland is entirely supportive, and they would usually probably be the ones to receive this stuff to ship over to Ukraine, it's unknown what they would do about that. So I like the idea that you're willing to, if you have guns, hand over some of them to be shipped over to Ukraine and help out the soldiers over there. But I don't really know about the process nor the actual practice of anything like that. So hopefully there is something like that. That would help them out a lot, because some Americans, kind of like myself, we are like gun collectors, and so we have like a wide array of guns for all kinds of situations, and you can just send them to have whoever would like one, I guess. So I thank you very much for the support. That's a pretty good idea. Hopefully someone has something like that out there, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, so I'm going to skip out of order just a tiny bit here. This one comes in from Liths Embers, who has been a commenter and donator here on the chat before. And we have so many questions here. So give me 1 sec.
How many do we have at the moment?
2 pages.
Oh, how many are on a single page?
Good question. It depends on how long. I'll get your tally here in a second. But Liths Embers asks, do you have any military experience, or how else are you so familiar with military details?
Okay, so I don't have military experience. That's something I'm asked a lot, and I find it very interesting that I'm convincing enough that people would have to ask that question. But I don't have any military experience. All my experience of like the conducting of war all comes from textbooks and well, not really textbooks, but reading books about how wars in the past were conducted, how supplies were managed, how the fighting actually was. And I have to say that if you actually read books that focus entirely on spreadsheets, like I read one book that everyone would probably be bored to death to read, and it was literally a book from the Civil War that detailed a battalion's supplies, like the wagon trains and all that stuff that they had to supply that one battalion through the course of the entire Civil War, from the first day to the last day. And you could see every single bit of supplies they got. And so it started to give me an idea, you know, in the general concept, that logistics were very important, because you were looking at how important that was, and then they give you an aside as to how those logistics actually affected their planning. And that really opened up my mind a lot. And so then I started reading a lot more about different wars and Russian strategies and other nation strategies, but mostly Russian and Chinese military strategies, because those are America's main rivals in the modern world. And you know, that's mostly where my military information came from, was just a lot of reading and a lot of books. Unfortunately, I haven't had any time to read anything new since the start of this war. I've been either doing college or focusing on this all day. But hopefully, my knowledge, at least, has been backed up by a lot of veterans. And if you are a veteran or are currently serving, hopefully you do find some validity in what I'm saying as well. And if you don't, then get me with me, and so hopefully I can reap some new stuff and maybe add a little bit to this. But I thank you very much for the support, And that was kind of an answer to your question. And now hopefully Drew has a figure for how many super chats we have.
Sitting on over 30 at the moment.
Yee. Golly, do we need to maybe shut that down for the night?
You're the boss.
All right. I think we're gonna let super chats go on for 10 more minutes. So if you would like to get a super chat in, we're gonna let that run until 11:40 Eastern time. But that's really 8 minutes, but still. And then we're gonna close it off so that way we can make sure that we answer everyone's questions that has one, and we can recognize everyone who sent in a super chat. That doesn't mean that the stream's ending soon. It just means that we've got so many questions that it'll probably take us until about 40 minutes from now or 50 minutes from now to answer them all. And so, with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes in from Mike Harney. How many Russian generals killed so far? I saw another video claiming that 5 have been taken out and that Ukraine special forces were targeting them.
At the moment, I've heard some reports today that a major general was killed, but I didn't add it to the news because that hasn't been entirely confirmed yet, although it probably is true. But at the moment, not including the one that may have been killed today, there's been 4 of them. And that is a high number for the amount of generals that have been killed in a war. I mean, if you look at the Iraq war, I don't believe any coalition generals were killed in that war. But we're going to pull it up. Were any generals killed in well, that's a good question too. Or became second general brigade general Moody died of a heart attack in 1967. Well, he didn't die by sniper, so that doesn't really count. Killed in Iraq. Let's see if we got anything on that. The highest ranking officer that was killed in the invasion of Iraq was Colonel William Wood. So the highest ranking officer in the U.S. that got killed, well, in the entire coalition that invaded Iraq that was killed, was a colonel. And now we're looking at 4 major generals being killed in Ukraine, and maybe a 5th one tonight. So going off of the just sheer havoc that the Ukrainians are wreaking on the higher chain of command of the Russian army, we can see that it's getting pretty stacked up at this point against them. They're having to replace these major generals with less experienced, lower ranking generals that may not have the same situational awareness as the previous ones. You know, there may be a prodigy amongst them, but you know, the chances of that are kind of unlikely. That's like a 1 in a million kind of thing most of the time. And so, as these generals keep getting killed and replaced all over the front, the amount of poor decision making and so on that's going to occur is just going to keep on going up and up, because that's usually how it occurs. That's usually how it happens in war, is that when a general is killed, they replace them, and the replacement is just a lot worse. So, right now I think it's about 4, but after tonight it might be 5. So I thank you very much for the support and the question, and with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
So we do have some comments. It looks like maybe one was indeed killed in Iraq or Afghanistan or in the Middle Eastern conflict. I don't have a name for you yet, though.
Got you. If you do get a name, make sure to let me know so that way we can, you know, check that out real quick.
Gotcha. And we do have some comments as well saying like their brigade man sergeant major was killed 2 weeks into the last deployment. Yeah, it's but next question here comes in from Rainier. Thank you for showing the Russian units being blown up, but let's also not forget that people are dying in them, and they're somebody's sons or fathers, and there are lots of families out there too. Believe me or not, believe me, not every single Russian wants to be there.
I can agree with that, but there are a few things that I always put into consideration when kind of rejoicing in the demise of Russians, is that I've seen an excessive amount of videos, and all of them don't go on stream, so this is kind of like only a thing that I can assess, but over the past 3 weeks nearly at this point, I've seen hundreds of videos of Russians gunning down civilians for no reason, multiple times. Hundreds of times. I can probably count hundreds of civilians at this point I've seen on film get killed by the Russians. And so, when I rejoice, I'm rejoicing as kind of a celebration of vengeance on the Russians, regardless whether those Russians in particular deserved it or not. The hundreds, if not thousands, of civilians they've killed at this point certainly didn't deserve it, because they're not even combatants. And so, I do understand your point, and it's an understandable thing. But if you're in my shoes and you'd seen all of the death and killing of civilians that I've seen over the course of these 3 weeks, you may be more inclined to be like me and celebrate when Russians are killed, because they'll, well, not killed, but when Russian tanks are knocked out and maybe the crew's killed as well, because you know that there'll be less Russians that can potentially kill civilians just hours later or days after that happened. So I understand what you're saying, and of course they have families and stuff, but you got to think that all the soldiers that they're killing and all the civilians they're killing every day have families as well, and so you have to kind of weigh it as a necessary evil, and sometimes an evil that has to be promoted in a way, because this is how wars are fought. And so that's kind of my take on it. And so that being said, I thank you very much for the support, and I'm sorry if we have a little bit of a disagreement there, but believe me, if you see what I see every day putting this thing together, you would probably be more inclined to think like me at this point. But I do thank you for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And just a little bit of a comment on that one. Oftentimes we'll see people asking, "Oh, why is there never any bodies when you're showing the videos of like convoys that have been destroyed and stuff?" If you haven't been exposed to what's going on over there, on the one hand, consider yourself lucky, because it's terrible. Yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Next question comes in from Knuckles, who skipped the line with a super chat. Biden is thinking of sending drones called switchblades. Is this maybe considered an escalation to Russia? Also, I agree something needs to be done, but is World War III worth it? And what does it mean that Russia left console of Europe? Thank you. And if you want any info on the switchblade, I've pulled it up.
Got you. I'll pull that up real quick on my screen as well, so that way everyone who doesn't know about it can see it as well, because I don't think I've ever heard about it either.
Little kamikaze drone.
Interesting. I've never seen this thing before, but it looks really interesting. That's really cool. So answering that, I don't really think they'd view it as an escalation, because Turkey is a NATO member, and they've been selling Bayraktar drones to the Ukrainians during the whole entire course of this war, and they're still selling them to the Ukrainians. So I don't really believe this will be looked at any differently. So on that regard, I don't think anything meaningful will change as far as Russia's stance on America's involvement in this war, considering that we're already sending them $13.6 billion in aid. If it's just straight up a grant of money to Ukraine, I would view that as being more serious than sending over drones, in my opinion, if I was Putin or someone in the Russian government. So I believe that it won't do anything. And to address the rest of the question, could I get a readback of kind of like the middle part beyond the switchblade drones?
Gotcha. He says, also, I agree that something needs to be done, but is World War III worth it? And what does it mean that Russia left console of Europe?
So I believe that something right should be done, and here's kind of like my explanation to this. The United States has always kind of stood out of both world wars, and it wasn't really a good thing in the end. We stepped back out of both world wars and said we're not going to get involved. We're just going to stay neutral in this. We'll detest Assad maybe, but we're not going to do any military action against him. And sooner enough, eventually, we got involved. And it's always a small minority of Americans at the time who are demanding that we get involved in these wars. And everyone else is saying, is it really worth it? Is it really worth going into a world war that can potentially be avoided to stop someone from doing evil things? And at this point in time, at this point in history, I guess I could say that, in the words of Otto von Bismarck, the best thing we've learned from history is that nobody learns from history, because this is resembling a lot of the motives and the ways that World War II started. And also, well, not really World War One. World War One was kind of a unique thing in how that one started, but in World War II terms, this is a lot how it started. There was an escalation. There were demands by a country that they were demanding for all of their people who were ethnically theirs to be reunited with their country, either peacefully or through force. And we can already see that they're kind of executing on that idea at the moment. And they're already talking about trying to invade Poland and take parts of it. And once someone says something like that, we know that their ambitions are not going to be stopped in Ukraine. They're not going to lose or win this war in Ukraine and go, okay, I'm going to stop there and that'll be enough. They're going to keep on going. And so it's only a matter of time at this point, in my opinion, whether we're going to be dragged in or not. Because he's already made it clear that he wants parts of Poland and the Baltic states, and maybe even Finland as well. And so we're going to be dragged in at some point somewhere. And it's not really a question of if we can avoid it, it's a question of when we will get into it. And usually in World War senses, it's usually better to step up and beat your chest now than later, because later it's going to be too far gone to close the lid on the genie and it'll be out of the bottle and we'll have to deal with it. But right now we can actually kind of step up and take an incredibly strong stance perhaps, and the Russians may back off because they haven't gotten too far into this. That's kind of my stance on this. That's entirely my opinion. So I don't want anyone to think that that's exactly the way it is, because that's just what I'm thinking about it right now. But I hope that answered the question. And I don't really know about Russia leaving the Council of Europe. I don't really know a lot about the Council of Europe. All I know about is the trade coalition that is the European Union. So I don't really know what that means in particular. But I think, since I don't really know much about it, it'd be nothing more than a symbolic act. Although it may be a little bit more than that. I'll have to read into it to try and get some information on that. But I thank you very much for the question and the support. And we're going to move on to the next one.
Next question comes in from Nessa No Davison. Odessa question. What are the chances of Russia using the Poseidon torpedoes in Odessa? Also, are the trapped international ships in the port protected?
The trapped international ships in the ports are probably not protected, because we saw in Mykolaiv that a few of them were actually hit at their moorings. So I don't really believe they'll be protected. One other thing that we do know is that I'm not really... let me make sure that the Poseidon torpedo is the right one I'm thinking about. I am kind of in that tired streak again tonight, so I don't have everything clicking. I don't really think this is a nuclear torpedo. This is the one I was thinking about. I don't really think they're going to use a nuclear torpedo against Odessa, because the nuclear torpedoes, from what is at least reported, are incredibly large in their nuclear yield. And so they wouldn't really be taking the city. They would be making it cease to exist and vaporizing everything from Odessa, probably well into Moldova. So I don't really think that they'll be using one of those. It would be a huge escalation. It would get the world involved at that point, pretty much, because the damage would spread to foreign countries like Moldova and Romania, most likely, because they're so close to Odessa. But you never know. I mean, like, Putin is an unstable person from what we can tell, and he could do anything at this point. So thank you very much for the question. I hope I answered all of it that I could. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question. And also, before we move on to the next one, let me just say the cutoff for Super Chats was 5 minutes ago. So if you're donating beyond this point, we're probably not going to be able to get to your question, but I do thank you for the support nonetheless.
So we've got a good comment here from Dyslexia Official, or Daslex. Says the Council of Europe, French, can't Set is an international organization founded in the wake of World War II to uphold human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in Europe.
Ah, okay, so that pretty much just means that they're symbolically saying we could give a crap about civilian lives or the rule of law in Europe, and we're just going to do whatever we want regardless. So that's pretty much, I guess, what they'd be saying through that, with the lack of knowledge I have on it and just hearing that information. So I hope that answers your question earlier about Russia leaving the Council of Europe. Apparently that's what I would think it suggests, but then again, that's my opinion, and I don't really know much about it. So that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and then here's just a few bulk names to acknowledge who have given super chats without having any real particular question attached to it. We've got Michael Fernandez with a $10 super chat. We've got Eric Pounders with a $10 super chat. We got Rick MacGillis with a $1 super chat. We got Takata Store in the chat once again with 3 Canadians. Says great work. And David Chaplin with a $2 super chat. And then we've got Caffeine with a $2 super chat that says optics are better than guns and ammo.
That's all of them?
That's a bulk of them. Any comments on the optics being better than guns and ammo statement?
Optics usually are. But the thing about optics versus guns and ammo is that the Russians don't really care about optics, except unless if they're broadcasting domestically, then they care. Then they'll make up their own optics for that. But as far as they care about guns and ammo. And then the Ukrainians heavily focus on both of them at the same time because Zelensky gets out there and he's pretty much strangling every Western leader for any guns and ammo they can give them. And then he's also focusing on the optics as well, and most Ukrainian citizens take it upon themselves to make sure that the optics side of things is very well accounted for. So that's kind of my assessment of what both sides are looking at right now as far as that statement. So I thank you very much for the support. And do we have any more that we can recognize at the moment?
So we've got three more quick ones that I'm pop this. Um, from Rodrigo de Salva, with 2R, whatever currency is $2 R. Just supporting this amazing work. Keep it up. We've got Easy Shifty with $2. It says, with that being said, and we have from John Kitson Music at $9.99.
Well, thank you all very much for the support. And that being said, we're going to move on back to the questions.
Next question comes in from B Syndicate. Here I have 1K ruble, TY for the stream. Russian army is proving to be the best tool Ukraine army has in its arsenal in terms of donated equipment, I'm assuming. Keep doing what you guys are doing. I think NATO should offer asylum, or do you think NATO should offer asylum for Russian army defectors?
Well, you've actually had that question before. I believe it was last night or the night before. But right now, we don't really know if they're going to, but I think they should. It's kind of like, it would kind of be like the modern equivalent of a Chu Hoi program like they had in Vietnam. So I think it would be to great effect. It would at least encourage maybe a few hundred defectors at the minimum, and maybe a few thousand at the most. But then again, you do have to remember that there's always a bit of internal things that Russian soldiers and every soldier around the world has to consider, and that's the fact of being caught trying to do it, because that will be worse than some other things that could happen to them if they tried that. So that always has to be considered. But I do believe that NATO should look into that, because I believe that it would be at least a beneficial step in the right direction. But they may be scared to do something like that because it involved them directly into the war, because they'd be repatriating Russian citizens into NATO through their own direct actions. What were you about to say, Drew?
So Caffeine clarifies with another super chat that says, "Tell the people going to Ukraine to bring your own optic with you."
All right, so
Well,
apparently
that's tricky. You don't know what you're going to get issued as far as firearmed. Are there any universal optics?
Oh my lord, hang on. I'm sorry. I think he was asking about like optics as in scopes and stuff, or guns and ammo. And I took
That
that
is
as like
correct.
optics as in like the picture on TV. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry that I didn't catch you. A lot of times, once I read you the question, I don't even listen to your answer as I'm working on the next one.
Okay, all right. Drew's at least silent muting me out. That's good. So we're gonna move on from that. To re-answer that question, I would probably suggest that bringing an optic would be the best thing to do. But then again, there's a lot to be said about trying to bring an optic, because you would have to make sure that it be able to be mounted onto an AK kind of platform, and make sure that you have some kind of mount that could do that. So, I wouldn't really know about the exactness about doing something like that, or what exactly you would need. But in between the two, you will always, of course, be provided a gun and ammo when you get to Ukraine. But an optic you may not be, unless if there's like some sort of foreign support and you happen to be one of those lucky people to get something like that. So I would bring your own optic instead, because I feel like that'd be more beneficial than the guns and ammo, because that's kind of already included in the airfare in a way. So I hope that answered the question, and we're going to move on to the next one, and hopefully not slip up like that again and misunderstand it. So what do we got, Drew?
And I'll try and pay more attention to make sure that we're actually capturing it. Yeah, duct tape, I guess, is always a solution, right? High temperature duct tape. I'm just kidding, of course. Next question comes in from 21st Century. Do you think Russia sent all their expendable equipment and soldiers to Ukraine and are just saving their best for the West?
I don't think so, because it looks like they were trying to flex their power and might in Ukraine with a quick invasion, and they've been sending their best stuff in first. We've seen a lot of destroyed T-80 BVMs, T-90As, T-72 B3s. That's the best armor you can find in the Russian army. We've seen a whole load of destroyed BMP-2s. We've seen BMP-3s that have been destroyed, and the BMP-3s are in a limited number. There's only a few hundred of those, like 500 or so, and they've destroyed a decent amount of them or captured them. We've seen Mi-28s being used, Mi-35s. As far as the equipment has gone, we've seen the best equipment being used, and we're going to assume that they wouldn't be giving their best equipment to their least experienced soldiers. They'd be giving their best equipment to the best equipped soldiers to make sure that they fight effectively. So I don't believe they're saving their best for the West. I believe their original plan was that the best would be saved for the West, but they'd still take over Ukraine with their best. So I hope that answers the question, because that's kind of my aspect, my viewpoint on this. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
Excuse me. Next question comes in from Big Tex. I'm choking on snack that I was eating on here. Sorry.
That's
Big
fine.
Tex. Call me Big Tree XX or Big Trio. Okay. Thank you for the attempted phonetics that stumbled me even more. Anyways, any chance the Russians in South want to push west all the way through Moldova and into Romania to the Bessarabian Gap?
Bessarabian Gap?
I think so.
I think they wouldn't want to do that, because you see, if they invade Romania, they're invoking Article 5 of the NATO Charter, and then that means that they'd be at war not just in Romania, they would be in war in Poland, the Baltic states, everywhere pretty much. And so they always have to carefully weigh that, because that could lead them into World War III. And so I don't think they would like to try and do some small land gains to claim Bessarabia, because that may in the end work towards their disadvantage and their demise very quickly. So I don't think they're going to try and do that, but I do think that they may try and land forces at Odessa. That's kind of been waffling even to me, because I'm not really sure if they're going to do that. But they do have those naval forces off the coast. We haven't seen them land a naval invasion yet anywhere rather than beside Mariupol, where they hadn't already controlled the ground where the naval invasion has occurred. And a lot of people in military circles are saying that they're actually waiting for the ground forces to capture the land, and then they're going to launch the naval invasion on captured land, which doesn't make any sense to me, but that's what a lot of people have been saying. So I think that's most likely the order of things in the Odessa area and what's going to happen in the future, but that's entirely my opinion. So I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, so next question comes in from Eric Pounders. There are different numbers being said of fighting forces on the Ukraine side, including foreign fighters. Do you have any idea how many fighters in each region?
We actually don't have an idea, and I usually don't like to publicize Ukrainian numbers, even if we were able to find some, because while those numbers are out there and they're being spread around, I don't want this to be one of those flashpoints where it gets a lot of publicity, because we've been getting a lot of viewership lately, and while we were getting a lot of viewership before, now we have a lot of people watching us, and if I put that on here, then people will just click on the map, or they'll listen to the stream, and they'll be getting exact numbers of Ukrainian forces and where. And so I don't really want to give that, because that put the Ukrainians at a disadvantage, because the Russians may be able to get a little bit extra more information on them that they may have not already known. As they say, loose lips sink ships. And so I thank you very much for the support, but unfortunately we don't have any numbers like that, and so we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes in from Big Blind. What can happen after the war to prosecute people who have committed war crimes, like the commander of the tank that shot the civilian? Will they have to dust off the Haug?
The Hague?
Hague?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. It's kind of like Bureau. I used to call Bureau Beru. Anyways, unfortunately there isn't really a way to convict war criminals or to try them for their crimes if the country that they're from still exists after the war. And so that tank crew will probably end up back in Russia once this war is over, maybe alive, and they will never have to be accountable for their crimes. That's usually how it works. Usually only victors who actually take over a country entirely get to hold war criminals accountable. So I don't think they will be dusting off the Hague anytime soon, sadly. But hopefully they do find swift justice from an anti-tank missile or something like that, because what they did in that tank was criminal, and hopefully something will happen to them before they leave Ukraine. So, that being said, I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes from Tim Yasubov. Any reports of chemical weapons or attack? What would be the proper response from Ukrainians to such war?
We haven't actually heard about any chemical attacks on the Ukrainians as of the moment. There's a lot of talk about one maybe happening in the future, but we don't know that for sure right now. But if a chemical attack was to happen on Ukraine, I think they would start throwing all the rules of war out of the window and start doing everything underhanded as possible as well. Because you fight fire with fire, and if the Russians are going to start using chemical weapons against you, you might as well start executing prisoners and stuff like that as well. So, in that regard, I think the Russians actually have a vested interest in making sure that they don't do anything like that, because all of the Russian soldiers that have been captured could just be executed afterwards, because the Ukrainians will see that the Russians aren't following the rules of war, and so why should they? And they'll just start executing prisoners in mass, probably. So one thing I always try and consider is that a country probably will not do anything like that, but then again, we're dealing with Russia, so we never know. They're not going to do anything that will endanger their prisoners by breaking the rules of war belligerently everywhere without regard, making it public, like something like that, because the prisoners are pretty much hostages at this point that the Ukrainians have. And so if the Russians start doing anything heinous, the Ukrainians could just be like, hey, we're going to execute prisoners now. And, then, you start devolving into just dehumanization on both sides. People are just killing everyone everywhere. So I don't think the Russians will be using chemical weapons anytime soon. So I hope that answers the question. And we're going to move on to the next one.
Next question comes in from Tim Murphy. Are you covering Ukraine attack on Russian copters at Kherson? I saw a report of it today.
I think I did yesterday. I believe that may have been yesterday's news or the day before's news. Let me make sure. Actually, 2 helicopters were shot down near Kherson on day 17. So if it was 2 helicopters that were shot down near Kherson, it was day 17 actually, and maybe it was just uploaded wherever you found it late, or maybe you're talking about helicopters that were shot down today that I haven't included in the stream because it happened just incredibly soon, right when I was starting maybe. So if you have any information to say that it may be new helicopters, let me know so that way I can include it in tomorrow's stream. But I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, so this next one comes in from Sebastian Buell. That says south of Sumy, below the green truck on map. And the next few questions also are related, possibly to chasing down the location of that city. We've got actual coordinates for it, and I have sent it to you in a private message over Discord.
I found it.
For the city there.
Yeah, I found it. It's just right below Troistyanets, and I didn't see it for some reason earlier. So
I'll acknowledge those other folks who commented on it. We have Altdrab and Peter Wart also provided the location.
Yeah, apparently I was blind earlier because it's like one of the larger cities in between Kharkiv and Poltava, but it's just a little bit north of where I was looking. It's like right on the top of the screen, so I guess I just wasn't paying attention well enough. But I thank them all for tracking that down for me. I'm glad that we have a lot of people in the comments who make sure to look through things and try and find the best information out of it. So I thank you very much. And how many super chats do we have left, Drew?
I will get back to you with that one. Next question comes in from Tito McLovin. Says UA has destroyed these small bridges at these coordinates if Mykolaiv fails, and I have sent you that Google Earth link if you want to take a look.
Got you. I'm going to pop open
and
that
I will
chat.
get a tally for you.
Let's take a look at this real quick and see what we got. So, we have this little bridge here, which seems to be on some kind of dike that separates this little reservoir from the sea. This is actually right on the spot where I said the Russians will probably try and stage a naval invasion because there's a nice little inlet here. So, that's interesting. Do they have another one? They do. They have this one here. We're going to check this one out as well. Oh, I'm sorry. That's just Okturka. So, sorry about that. Apparently, it's just this one bridge, perhaps? I believe so. But yes, but they would blow that bridge for sure because they would have to get a bridge laying crew out here to try and lay it. it looks like it's no longer than a 150-foot span. So blowing up that bridge would just kind of be like buying time. It wouldn't really be like a major obstacle. And I believe that if they were to blow up a bridge from Mykolaiv, the most important one would actually be the one in town on the E58, because this one actually spans the what's this thing called again? It's like the Bug River or something like that. So it's a much larger river, and we actually found out that the currents are so fast on this river that they can't actually lay down a pontoon bridge on this because it just couldn't stand up to the currents. So if they blew up a bridge here, that would just be a hindrance, and they'd have to travel further north upstream until the currents weren't too strong or the river was narrow enough for them to actually lay out a bridge and then cross the river there. So Mykolaiv is incredibly important at the moment. And so that being said, we're going to see if Drew's got a total of how many super chats we have left.
We have 16 remaining.
All right, so we're going to try and knock these 16 out. It looks like we may start going overtime here. So the answers are going to get somewhat brief. I'm sorry if this happens every night. It's just that we don't ever expect to have this many super chats each night, but we're very appreciative of them, and I'm going to try and get you all the best answers I can in the shortest amount of time now. So that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes in from Nessa No Davidson. The UK showed Putin what is coming with military exercises.
It's just kind of like a statement.
Apparently, the UK military is conducting some exercises to let them know what's what.
Well, that's good. That's a good thing if they are. The British hold in a high regard. They have a very interesting military history, a very successful military history as well. They are the second most victorious nation on earth in terms of victories in battle, behind France. Well, actually, no, I believe that they're actually third now. The United States kind of ousted them of that title, I believe, just a few decades ago. But I'm not really sure. I believe France, Britain, and the United States are the top three in terms of military victories. So that being said, I would be kind of concerned if the British are doing exercises. So I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Question comes from Jason Barnes. Did you hear about the Russian soldiers supposedly trapped in an elevator? Not sure if it's accurate, but it was all over the web. Curious if true.
It is true. It happened a while ago, and it happened so long ago, it's actually not on this week's map. It's on last week's map, I think. But it was a group of VDV troops that decided to take the elevator near Kherson somewhere, and they got in it, and then the people who operated the building just turned off the power, and they got stuck in the elevator. So that was a really funny story, actually, when it happened. You can check out the week 2 map. It should still be active on one of the older videos that happened during week 2, and you should be able to find it somewhere in the Kherson area. So I thank you very much for the support, and it actually is true, and it's really weird that it happened. And so, that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes from, or next comment from Mark Bohychuk. Says, here's 5 Canadian dollars for coffee.
Thank you very much for the coffee. I actually didn't drink one tonight, so I'm suffering right now. But I'm going to get through all these questions. And I hope you all enjoyed the news as well, because we're over that at this point. We're just going through questions. So hopefully I didn't reflect my tiredness in a way during the news. But I thank you very much for the coffee. And we're going to move on to the next question.
So here we have Adam the Great again clarifying from an earlier super chat that it's Medford. So perhaps I mispronounced it or said Melford or something. Medford, Oregon. Do you think any troops from Russia switch sides, and or would Ukraine let them switch sides and fight on behalf of them or alongside them?
That's a tough question to answer because we don't have any instances or examples of anything happening like that. So I believe what the Ukrainians are doing is they're just letting the Russians surrender, and then they go and hold them in some kind of internment camps or prisoner of war camps or something like that. Because we've gotten no evidence of Russians returning to the fight on the Ukrainian side, and if they did, I'm very sure that we would get that would be a huge propaganda coup. Everyone would be all over that immediately. So I don't think that's happening. But I do thank you for the question, and hopefully maybe a Russian would join their side so that way they can use that to their advantage to show that even Russians are so against what they're doing that they'd actually fight for the Ukrainians once they surrender. So I thank you very much for the question, and we're going to move on to the next one.
Now here's a question from me. Could prisoners of war who had committed war crimes be exported out of the war zone to a NATO country to be tried for war crimes?
Ooh. I mean, from my basic legal knowledge, that would implicate NATO as an active participant in the war because they'd be trying war criminals on, in their own jurisdiction, which would kind of say that they had like a part in this thing, and that would start to implicate NATO directly into this confrontation from what I know. But then again, that's my opinion from my limited legal knowledge of how things like that internationally would work. I think what the best thing to do for that would be the Ukrainians try them themselves. And we know that the Ukrainians sometimes actually do execute people who surrender on site because they have been known to do things on the field and they actually know that those people are the exact ones that did it and then they execute them. I've seen a couple of instances of that here and there. So I don't really think that would be possible, but it is an idea that we may have to look into to see if it is something that can happen. So that being said, let's move on to the next question. And also, thank you for the support, Drew. It's always good to get a nice question.
Yeah. You're welcome. All right. So Adam West says, or Westby, saw a picture of Russia with using old Mosin Nagant rifles, scopes, inspired MPs from 2000. Also, 50-year-old tank. Can you speak to this?
Also, Drew, you're cutting out a bit. I don't know if it's because you're far away from the mic and it's hardly picking you up, but
Okay.
To talk.
I'll try and reposition. Did you capture enough of it?
Yes, I did to get that one, but I'm just making sure so the viewers can like hear the whole thing because it's coming through in like pieces. But the Mosin Nagants, I have not seen Mosin Nagants used myself. I actually used to own one of those. I did not like it at all. It jammed once it got hot because the shell, like not the shell, but the casing of the bullet would like expand due to the heat inside the barrel, and when it got hot enough, for some reason that would just jam the bolt and the bolt wouldn't open, so you'd have to like pull out like a hammer and just start smacking the bolt open. It was crazy. I hated those things, and I haven't seen any evidence of them using those, and if they were, that'd be a huge disservice to their own like war, because those things are terrible from my experience. And 55-year-old tanks, I think I may know which one you're talking about. I think you're talking about the Boneyard tank, if I have that picture up here still. It would be something hard to find. I think it was actually on last week's. Yeah, it was probably last week's, yeah. But we saw a Boneyard T-72, and it may be the one you're talking about. And if so, I have seen that, and we do have an idea that the Russians may be running out of up-to-date and well-maintained armor to use, and now they're pulling in old stuff to replace their losses. So I can attest to that, and it looks like they may start having an armor situation here soon where they're having a hard time getting up-to-date armor to the front. But the Mosin Nagant situation, I haven't really heard anything about, so if it is true, I'm going to try and keep up to date on that and make sure that we have some more information on that. And so, that being said, I thank you very much for the question and the support, and we're going to move on to the next one.
Next comment comes from Toby Wong with a $5 super chat and says, here's 500 rubles. And it's actually about 570 rubles.
Ooh, he overpaid. But I thank him for the support. It's always nice to get support to the channel because this is the only way we support it. And I do love answering questions because a lot of y'all ask pretty good questions, and some of them are just so original that it's like, wow, it's like, that's really insightful. And like, it's a very good question to try and answer. So I thank you very much for the support. And that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes from Kyle Smith. The video of the Russian tank being destroyed in the location unknown section had what appeared to be a burning man running from the tank. Brutal.
Oh, I was about to pull that video back up and show it again, but if that's the case, we may not want to pull that up because YouTube could mark that as NSFW maybe. I don't know. But I didn't see that. If anyone wants to go back and look at that again, please feel free. But now that I've heard that, I'm kind of scared to go back and look at it again, just in case if it is graphic. That's not fear out of me seeing it. It's fear out of YouTube seeing it, because YouTube will come over here and put me down like a dog. So that's very interesting if that's true.
I was gonna say like a sick dog that's had a long good life, though.
Yeah, like old Yeller, just yeah, I guess. But I thank y'all. I thank you very much for telling us that, so that way people can click on the map and go back and look at that here soon if they would like to. If for some reason that fancies them. And so that being said, I thank you very much, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes from Austin Bin. I saw a report from a former US official claiming Russia only has 10 days of ammo and supplies left. Any thoughts?
I have not seen that report, and I think it would be weird for Russia to only have that much ammo left, because we know that they produced so much ammo in Soviet times that that's the reason why the 7.62 54 rimmed cartridge is still being used and guns are still being made to use it, is because there's just so much lying around they have to find some use for it. So I'm not really sure if that's true, at least in gun ammo, like for normal small arms. I don't think they'd be running out anytime soon, but maybe for larger caliber weapons like artillery or grads or tanks, maybe they are running out of ammo for those, but I don't really have any information to say either way, and all that's kind of like an opinion and an assumption on my part. But I do thank you for the question, and we're going to try and look into that here on the channel. And so that being said, thank you for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Question comes in from David Hernandez. What are your thoughts on Russians doing a coup in the future, or do they or are they too afraid of Putin? And can we go ahead and interject there that you just received a super chat of $100 from Johnny?
Woo! Dang! Thank you, Johnny. Is that Johnny Walker?
I don't know.
Well, if
Just Johnny.
if that's Johnny Walker, then thank you so much. I'm a big fan. And so, moving on from that, I don't think the Russians will be conducting a coup per se, because a coup, it's kind of hard to do, and especially if you don't have a backing from anyone in the government, because if the government's against the people, especially in a country like Russia, there's really no there's really no leg for the civilians to stand on, the citizens to stand on. And so unless if there's actual support for a coup inside the government, I don't think it'll happen anytime soon. But that's just my belief. You know, the kind of like Soviet uprising during the Russian Civil War, that wasn't backed by the government, but we saw nonetheless it rose up and then it succeeded against the Tsar. So I don't know, maybe something like that could happen now. I'm not entirely sure, but I do thank you for the question. That's a pretty good question. We've kind of covered that at length in some previous streams. So if you'd like to check out those and maybe get a better idea of like my deep dive thoughts on that in a way, when we were covering the civil unrest in Russia, that's probably a very good place to go to find it, because right now I'm having a hard time kind of like stringing together everything I've said about it, because I'm like bushed right now. But I thank you very much for the question and the support, and we're going to move on to the next question. But before we do, how many do we have left?
8 of them.
Oh, okay. All right. That's not bad. All right. So next question.
Next question comes from Blown Apart 100, who has been a frequent commenter here in the chat via Super Chat. In 2 weeks, without Russia making huge strides, will they give up?
I think that they might. Modern wars aren't really the kind of wars that just drag on and on and on. It's either you get results immediately, or nothing happens, you hardly make any ground, and then you try and make some sort of peace agreement just to get the thing over with. Long wars in modern optics are terrible. The only kinds of wars that go well, that drag on for forever, is the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. The invasion of Iraq and the kind of like occupation and conducting of like military operations within Iraq lasted like 10 years or so. But the thing was is that it was only in the modern it was only on like the public eye for a short while, about a month during the actual invasion. We took the entire thing over, and then afterwards it was just kind of like a behind the scenes thing. It was brought up every once in a while, but it wasn't something that required massive amounts of resources or attention from the public, and so it just kept on going, kind of like Afghanistan. It was just a thing that was going on, and it was a thing that we were invested in, but we weren't invested in enough that it actually caught like public attention and was a serious concern of the public for years on end or months on end. So those kinds of wars can last, but a war like Ukraine, where it just isn't going well and they're in it for weeks and now it'll look like they're probably going to be in it for a month or more, those will probably start to end because there's just no ground being made and nothing meaningful is happening here for them to make it worth their time anymore. So I think that may actually be the way it turns out. And I thank you very much for the support. And also, I thank you very much for being a frequent chatter in our chat. It's always good to know that we have regulars that come through and put down super chats and just talk in the chat in general. And so I thank you very much. And we're going to move on to the next question.
So the next question comes in from Naria with a big old $100. And this is not Naria's first time throwing down 100. So thank you. Do you have any photos of the standard issue volunteer rifles, as seeing some examples might help people choose the right optics / accessories?
That's a very good question. Let's see if we can pull that up. Standard Foreign Legion rifles in Ukraine. See if we can get some pictures of this. There's a Malyuk bullpup rifle. This appears to be an AK. Well, that's an American using that, so that's definitely not anything they're using now. Foreign fighters here appear to be using. I can't really tell what that thing is. I was going to say like a G3, but that's obviously not a G3. I don't have a clue what that thing is. Maybe a Galil? Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of guessing and just throwing pot shots at that. That appears to be an AK-74 or a 105 or something like that. Really, it looks like they're getting a wide array of weapons from the pictures we're seeing here. This just appears to be a normal AK-74 maybe, or an AK-105. Can't really tell from this far of a range, and there's like so many tiny details that make an AK-74 like an AK-103 or a 105 and all that stuff that I really can't tell. But I think the most common thing they would be issued is some kind of AK-74, and usually they all have the same receivers, except for like an AK-12. I think that one's a little bit different. So as long as you can find anything that can mount to an AK-74, I think you'll be okay. But you may want to check with the Ukrainian embassy. Maybe they'll give you some information about that before you go over there, if you'd like to do that. And so that way you could make sure that you get the best optic and the best way to fit it onto the gun instead of just trying to jimmy rig it later on. So thank you very much for the question and for the support. It's amazing. I can't believe that you actually, this is like the not the first time you put down $100 to support this channel.
This is the third time.
The third time. I cannot believe that. That's insane. I thank you so much for supporting our channel and liking it that much. Not to be self-depreciating or anything, but I don't know what you see in this channel for you to like me so much, or the channel, or what we're doing. But I thank you nonetheless, because it means a lot to us, and I know that I'll be able to run the channel for a good while off of donations like that. And so I thank you from the bottom of my heart for that one, because it means a lot to me. And so I thank you very much. I hope I answered the question to the best of my abilities. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Next comment comes in from Paul Heel with a $10 super chat. This is no question, just thank you.
No problem at all. You're welcome. I'm glad I can make sure to keep the stream running for y'all. And I'm going to try and keep this thing running until the last day of the war. That's the goal. I'm going to keep... this thing is going to document every single day of the war until this war ends. And hopefully it's sooner than later. And so thank you very much once again. And we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, so next one comes in from PG that states Central Africa and Syria are sending in volunteering army to help Russia. Will change the war because this now changed to 4 versus 1?
It will not change the war, because we actually did take a look at the Syrians, and they looked like a bunch of dumbos. They looked like they hadn't learned anything over years of fighting just by how they were acting in front of the camera. They acted unsure of just even existing. And I don't really know about any of the African countries. I haven't heard anything about that. But if you've ever seen them try and fight a war or a military coup or anything like that, the amount of military training that any African militaries have fielded is incredibly low. It's on par with what the Syrians are doing. So I don't really think they're going to change the war, because just due to a lack of training, I think they're going to be more of a hindrance on the Russians, who are already undertrained, than a help. So I hope that answers the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And I have got some feedback from the mods saying that they will try and chase down some answers for Naria for tomorrow's stream.
Got you. And once again, thank you to all the mods, because y'all are great. Y'all help me out so much. And of course, we'll talk about that in the AAR afterwards. But anyways, we're going to move on to the next question.
Next one comes in from Sebastian. Well, this is another one where he was just sharing the location once again. So thank you, Sebastian. I know it's quite late to getting used fluted in there.
Well,
Next question comes in from Trevor Feichel. Will the majority of the Russian forces be arrested for war crimes, or will it just be their commanding officers once the war is over?
I feel like in some of these cases, like the tank crew gunning down the guy in Mariupol, they're going to go after each one of those individually if they can. I don't know if they'll be able to arrest them. Maybe something that they may do is if they're able to capture that crew and confirm that is the crew of that tank that did that, they may execute them on sight. Because sometimes in war, although it does sound terrible even when the side you're supporting is doing it, sometimes in war there's not time to capture prisoners and there's not time to actually conduct a kind of fair trial to, get this thing on through. And so sometimes, even in the United States historically, we've executed prisoners who we know have done war crimes, or we just don't have the ability to take care of on the spot. So that may be something that happens because it's happened before, but then again, we never know. The Ukrainians seem to be acting very civil to most of the Russian prisoners we see on film, and so I believe that they may actually hold them in a prisoner of war camp or try and arrest them and then hold them accountable for their crimes at a later date once the war's over. But we never really know, and that's really just my opinion and kind of like the multiple takes that you can get from this and the multiple ways it can go. And so I thank you very much for the support. I hope that answers the question, and with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
Next question comes from Jeremy Taker. What would happen if Russia hit outside the Ukraine?
It depends on where it would hit, but really no, it wouldn't really matter where it would hit because everything surrounding outside of Ukraine is a NATO country, I think, except for Moldova. But let me check that. Is Moldova NATO? Does not allow thus. Okay, so Moldova is the only country that's not NATO. So it's the only other kind of like neutral country in Europe that if anything hit it, nothing would happen. But if anything hit outside of Russia, like in the Baltic states, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, if anything hit there, that's pretty much Article 5, which would mean direct war in between Russia and NATO, because Article 5 of the NATO Charter says that an attack upon one member state is an attack upon all of them, and they must treat it accordingly. So if Poland got attacked, Britain must treat it like they got attacked, and everyone would pretty much immediately go to war. So if anything hit outside of Ukraine, it would pretty much be World War III in most cases. So I thank you very much for the support, and it's a good question. A decent amount of people asked it, but it's always good to have a chance to clarify that each night, because a lot of people have that question on their minds. That's why it's being asked a lot. And so I thank you very much for the question, and with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
Okay, so from GNF, how is Mariupol doing currently?
Mariupol is holding, at least from a strategic standpoint. It is holding and is currently tying up thousands of soldiers in its defense, because the Russians are having to try and push this thing and flush the Ukrainians out for this fleet of ships, apparently in the Sea of Azov. They're going to use the port at Mariupol to land more troops there. So the situation is good strategically, but for the civilians, it's incredibly poor. Water and food's been cut off, and there's really no food nor water left. People are starving. People are getting blown up all over the place. We saw a guy get killed by a tank today. It just fired the main gun straight at him and killed him. They're targeting civilians indiscriminately. Civilians are trying to escape with varying degrees of success. It's a pretty tough thing going on in Mariupol at the moment, but they are holding, and that's the most important thing right now, is that they are actually holding the strategically important city. And a lot of people, including myself, are starting to believe that this will be the turning point of the war. If the Ukrainians can hold this, things may start to go in Ukraine's favor by a large degree. And so I hope that answers the question in kind of like a nutshell. And I thank you very much for the support. And that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Next super chat comes in via Greg Carmen with $49.99. What chance do the Ukrainians have to stop the Russians? Will guerrilla warfare be the most likely outcome?
I believe that the best chance that the Ukrainians have to stop the Russians is what they're doing right now, and they're doing a very good job at it. I don't really think it's going to resort to guerrilla warfare if their whole entire country surrenders and capitulates. But in the areas that currently are captured and controlled by the Russians, we have been seeing limited levels of guerrilla warfare against logistical units. And so, in the occupied territories, that is the way of the land at this point. But in the actual territories that are not controlled by Ukraine anymore, all their efforts are being focused on the actual army and trying to get foreign volunteers in to bolster those numbers and mobilizing the male population. And so I believe that they actually have a very good fighting chance of actually winning the war. Not like pushing the Russians back and capturing Moscow kind of winning, but holding them where they are to the point that it's not a viable strategy to try and invade Ukraine anymore. And then they'll have to sue for peace. And so I think that they do have a chance of winning at the current conditions they have right now. And so I hope that answers your question. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next one.
Final question from the super chats comes from Jammy NFT with £2. Should Ukraine fire missiles into Russia?
Yes, and they already have. I got enough information today to confirm that the army armory that blew up in Kursk was in fact hit by a Ukrainian cruise missile, and there also was another cruise missile that landed in Rostov-on-Don at the airport and destroyed an Su-25 and an IL-76, I believe. So they have been firing cruise missiles into Russia, and I believe they should continue to against military targets, so that way they can try and destroy as much equipment as possible before it enters Ukraine and can be used against them. So, in that regard, yes, I do agree. And I hope that answers your question. And I thank you very much for the support. And while this stream has gone over, I don't ever want anyone to think that you have to give a super chat to get a question answered. And so we're going to answer 2 or 3 questions from the normal chat, and then we're going to call it a night.
Okay, so this next question comes in from Courtney. Does Russia have the forces in reserve to escalate further, as many are suggesting he will?
Could you say that again? You kind of cut out on the first part.
Okay, so does Russia have the forces in reserves to escalate further, as many are suggesting he will?
Yes. So they do in numbers. They have around 700,000 soldiers in the army. But the problem is that they don't have the logistics to actually support all those soldiers in the current way that the war is being fought, because they require railheads and pipelines to be laid down, and they currently have not constructed railheads into Ukraine, nor have they laid down any meaningful amount of pipelines to supply their military, and so they're having to supply it entirely by truck. And we did the math a while ago, and they're short several thousand trucks. And now that we thought tonight about adding in Ukrainian civilians into that figure and having to make sure that they all don't starve, then you need even thousands more trucks added to that figure to make sure that they all don't die as well, and you have some major scandal on your hands in a major kind of like how would I say this, optics failure, to use optics the way I thought it was being used earlier, because you would be starving out all these Ukrainians you claim you're liberating. So I don't think, while they do have the numbers, I don't think they'll actually use them, because they just don't really have the ability to, as far as we know. And so I thank you very much for the support and the question. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes from Tom Wallop. I find your channel very informative, and I do have a question. I see reports of the Turkish drones being very effective. What about U.S. drones?
I don't think the U.S. has given them a lot of drones. I think they may have given them none at the moment. But I really can't say anything about that, because we don't really have any numbers about how many American drones the Ukrainians have or how many they plan on getting. But we do know that the Turkish drones have been incredibly effective so far. We've seen tons of footage of them wiping out convoys with just one Bayraktar. But if the Americans give over drones, we'll have to see how well those do too, because I would be very interested to see if a Reaper drone is equivalent to a Bayraktar drone, or if a Bayraktar would actually be more effective in its role. I guess time will tell us that, if Ukraine does have American drones, or if they're going to get some soon, and we'll see them in action. So I thank you very much for the question. That was actually an interesting one. And I do thank you for the support to the channel. It's always good to hear that people support it. And so we're going to answer the last question for the night.
Alrighty. So from ERS, Stream Enforcer, is it true that it will be part of the grand plan to keep the large convoy intact while not attacking the convoy, instead just attacking supply units coming to the convoy?
Actually, the situation has changed on that convoy. As far as we know, there's about 15 miles of it left on the road, and we haven't even gotten really any news on that, so that may have actually moved on as well now. But we know that the forward parts of the convoy actually dispersed into lower density kind of like combat areas of the front line where they're not going to be using up a lot of resources. I'm sorry if that's not like the proper wordage for that, but I don't really know what the proper wordage for that would be. But they've been moved to areas of the front line where there's very little fighting, so they eat up very little resources. They're just generally sitting there. And so I don't really think they're attacking the large convoy anymore, because it's really ceased to exist as far as we know, except for maybe a small part left near Chernobyl that's been hanging out there still. And so they are attacking the supply convoys that are heading down to the Russian army that's north of Kyiv, and also the rest of the units that are spread out along this front line that we have here in red. So they really can't destroy the convoy anymore because it doesn't exist, but at the same time, they are destroying the logistics trying to head to the parts of the convoy that have spread out at this point, because, of course, that's kind of like a Ukrainian strategy at this point, is to make sure that the logistics just crumble, which they already kind of are. And so, I hope I answered that question to the best of my abilities, and with that, it is time to end the stream. If y'all are all watching and new to the channel, I hope you liked the news, and if you did, make sure to subscribe, because this stream comes on every single day at the exact same time. We come on at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every single day. We've been doing this for 20 days now, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. I thank you all very much for watching. I hope you found something about the news informative, and I'll see y'all all again tomorrow. Thank you all so much for the support, and I'll see y'all around.
Запануєм і ми, браття, у своїй